So welcome back, CIS 123. So the topic of today is going to be covered in week 3 lecture. We're just going to talk about a number of things related to encapsulation, inheritance, data hiding, again will be revisited, and also the notion of interfaces and implementation of modular software. So the first slide essentially talks about conceptual stuff, some of the conceptual stuff. So you can see that we already started discussion about objects. That essentially an object is a some sort of a nice shiny thing that is attractive. It's useful, and it comes with a number of things that we can do with it and use it in our software. I told you before that making analogies in software is somewhat a difficult proposition. Typically it's just conceptual, but in this particular instance, what is kind of hard to grasp is that this object here, this nice shiny car, antique car or hot rod, name it, looks like it's very special and very unique, but in reality in software it's easy to manufacture copies of objects. So this is perhaps the abstract nature of software, is that you can quite easily manufacture copies of objects. Once you have one, you can create many. That's useful to know. But today we're going to focus on the fact that when you have an object, we're going to discuss things such that it most likely has some encapsulated parts or hidden parts, or the parts that are not necessarily important for the user to make successful utilization of this object, such as engine parts. Some drivers drive cars and never open the hood, right? And most of us nowadays, that the cars become more smarter, I guess, with all the electronic equipment in them. We're just, when I open the hood of my truck or car, I sort of like look at it and I don't even know what's inside anymore. It's getting more and more complicated and sophisticated. So that's an expected thing, I guess, because to drive, you really don't have to know every single detail about the car. So we say that typically objects have encapsulated parts or hidden parts, and that's by design. It's intended that you don't have to struggle with every single detail before you can try to make use of it or create it. It's possible because each object designed wisely and designed properly should have a proper user interface, a well-designed public interface. We talked about the possibility of labeling parts of our class members, such as data attributes or methods inside of our classes in Java, an ability to mark them public or private. And that would make essentially distinction for the compiler to understand what is part of the public interface, and everything else, if it's not part of the public interface, falls into the category of implementation. So typically details are hidden inside the object, and we refer to it as the encapsulation and object-oriented paradigm. Class interface is somewhat an overused term, but it's also a very technical term. So for programmers, interfaces have very concrete meaning. They have very well-defined and very specific to the programming language definition and look and feel, if you will. On the broader scope of things, an interface, of course, is the fundamental means of communication between parts, right? So, if you have different parts of your project, most likely different parts of software are going to use certain ways of or certain protocols of communicating, and that would involve what is possible to do and what's not possible to do. All of this fundamentally defines what communication can be established within the project. And classes, which are blueprints of our objects, very well define what is available, what is expected behavior of our objects when they're created. To give you an example, this little picture looks like a TV set and the remote control, right? So, what do you think is here? What is common between those two devices? Two physical devices. What is common between them? What is the commonality? So let me try sort of like chart some notes here so we can keep track of our thoughts, I guess. That's my habit, actually. When I do work, I typically have some window open where I just type some ideas. So, commonality. What are the commonalities between a TV set and a remote control? A set of buttons, maybe, right? Maybe a set of functions that you can find in the description of your TV and then on top of your remote control interface. So we'll say buttons, right? Now let's talk about TVs. Let me do this way. So TVs. So we have conventional type, right? I guess today they're getting obsolete. So maybe more conventional today is HD TV, right? HD TV. That's more of a mainstream type of thing. Then, well, I guess I can only think about something that's called smart TV. Smart TV. So smart TV is basically, the idea of a smart TV is that it's most likely HD TV plus the internet access, right? So let's resize this so we can kind of follow those set of ideas. Now, if I'm thinking about remote control for a TV, there could be, I guess, similarly, I could have a remote control with just, up, down for channels, up, down, and also volume control, right? Up, down for volume control, and probably on, off button. If someone gave me a remote control with these essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, I can successfully maybe operate a TV. Another type of remote control could have this, right? All of the above, plus perhaps maybe recording options. In that sense, interestingly, I would also say that a TV could be connected to a cable box or one of those boxes that your cable provider gives you. So we can say set-top um, how do they call them? Like I guess set-top box, something like that. So that set-top box can actually do everything that a TV can do, and then you can connect to it a conventional type TV, or analog, I guess, TV, and watch the television programming. Okay, so here, that's why I say recording options. Sometimes those recording options could be applied to the set-top box, sometimes to a smart TV, if your smart TV understands those kind of things, or maybe your HDTV implements those things. So, as you can see, there could be multiple kinds of devices on the TV side, and multiple kinds of devices, more sophisticated, less sophisticated, more complex, less complex, on the side of a remote control. Okay, agreed? But what's interesting, that all of these devices can be designed, I guess if we start talking about the design of these things, that we can first define the interfaces, and second, we can say implement these interfaces in our devices. So, for example, this could be, the basic remote control interface, up, down, volume control, also up, down, and also on and off button, can probably be implemented by all of these TVs as well, right? So maybe you don't have to have a remote control. If you really want to watch television, you can walk up to a conventional TV, right? Maybe it's connected somehow, so it has some reception, so you can turn it on and off, and then you can control the volume, the sound, and then you can flip the channels, right? So the remote control, of course, is not a TV, but it can do it can allow you to do those things, because it will delegate, infrared signal to the TV will respond, and the expected thing will happen. So, but the design is that, our design thinking is that, maybe first version of our software, if we're trying to think about abstract nature of software, that we're trying to model something like this, we can first rely on this up-down and very basic set of communication signals between parts of our software, right? So then, interestingly, that when we say implement, so we say this is some sort of like a basic interface, right, for our world, for our communication. If this is our basic interface, then implementation by conventional type television of this basic interface will be specific to that conventional television. Implementation by HDTV will be specific by HDTV. For example, you can flip on and off on a conventional television type, and it will definitely, go to like a, switch off most of its components. It will be only the sensor which will still be active and be able to respond to the remote control. That's it. HDTV may actually not completely turn itself off, but just, bring down the screen and then set up a timer to gradually bring down other powered components, so that it's, if someone walks right back to it within a minute and turns it on, it will instantly come up, because it really hasn't turned itself off entirely, right? So smart TV will behave perhaps in a similar manner, so would that it also is aware of some kind of internet connection, and typically that internet access, it's actually Google, I think Sony, Google, and Intel. Those three companies originated this talk and thinking about smart television compared to smartphone, that you can do internet searching, some basic browsing, and somehow make it more useful in terms of user experience. So anyway, probably this internet access part really isn't affected by the basic interface. So perhaps HDTV implementation of this basic interface is exactly the same in both HDTV and smart TV. Okay, if we just kind of like wandering in the territory of those technologies. Now, set-top box will have its own implementation of that as well, because you can see that perhaps the top box can also do similar things, turn itself on off, change the channels and things like that. All right, so as you can see, the interface is exactly the same, but implementation by different parts is different. So just that's the essence of the idea. There's an idea of interface that everyone can understand, but only the engineer who designs HDTV will be able to explain in all details what really happens under the hood, inside the device. All right, and of course, remote controls of different kinds will have their own implementation of all of these things. All they do, they will just generate a unique signal for each click that the user attempts. They really don't turn themselves off because they typically run off the battery. So they don't have to be concerned about turning the entire circuitry down, right? So very different. But look, they too implement this basic interface. So obviously implementation inside your remote control, implementation inside your smart TV is absolutely different. But still, those things respond well to these defined interfaces. All right, so let me save this. Let me see, I think we're well into our first recording session.